In De Anima, on the soul, Aristotle explores one of the most profound mysteries of existence. What is the soul? How does it animate the body? This question has fascinated thinkers for centuries, but the conversation didn't stop with Aristotle in the 4th century BCE. In the 12th century, Averroes of Cordoba, also known as Ibn Rushd, took Aristotle's work and wrote his long commentary on De Anima, offering a sharp interpretation rooted in Islamic philosophy. Nearly a century later, in the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas crafted his own commentary on Aristotle's De Anima, bringing a Christian perspective into the conversation. Today, we'll bring these two monumental thinkers together in a simulated debate about the nature of the soul, its connection to the body, and its potential immortality. Prepare yourself as we dive into the heart of philosophical inquiry with De Anima, exploring Aristotle's timeless ideas through the minds of Averroes and Aquinas. The year is 1265. We find ourselves in the Grand Library of Cordoba, a center of knowledge and philosophy in Al-Andalus. Outside, a storm rages. Thunder rumbles across the sky, and rain pours heavily against the arched windows as flashes of lightning illuminate the dark clouds over the ancient city. Inside, however, the Grand Library stands serene and imposing, its high-vaulted ceilings echoing the whispers of scholars who once walked these halls. Averroes, his sharp eyes focused, sits on one side, surrounded by volumes of Aristotle's works in Arabic. Across from him, Thomas Aquinas, his calm demeanor betraying the intensity of his thoughts, places his Latin edition of De Anima on the table. Averroes opens De Anima to Book 2.
Let's begin here, Thomas. Aristotle writes, "The soul is the first actuality of a natural body that has life potentially in it." This is key. Aristotle is telling us that the soul is the form, the forma, of the body. It animates the body, but it doesn't exist on its own. The soul is the principle of life, but without the body, it ceases to be. They're inseparable.
I see your point, Averroes. Aristotle does say the soul is the form of the body, and he describes it as the first actuality, actus primus. But we can't reduce the soul to just biological functions. Aristotle uses actus primus to describe something more than just animation. The rational soul, anima rationalis, is what understands universals, or universalia. That suggests it reaches beyond the body. Doesn't that point to the soul being more than just tied to the body?
Thomas, Aristotle is clear. The soul is the form, nothing more. You're reading too much into actus primus, first actuality. The soul is what gives life, but it can't exist without the body. Even the rational soul depends on the body for its thinking. Without the senses, there's no intellect. Aristotle never suggests that the soul can exist independently of the body.
But Averroes, when Aristotle says the rational soul engages with universals, he's talking about truths that are beyond the material world. Universalia aren't tied to sensory experiences. The intellectus grasps things that are eternal, unchanging, things that exist independently of the body. Surely that means the rational soul isn't completely bound to the body. It transcends it.
The intellect can engage with universals, yes, but it can only do so through the body. The senses feed the intellectus. Without the body's sensory input, there's nothing to abstract from. Aristotle's anima, the soul, relies on the body to think. When the body dies, that entire process ends. The forma ceases to function without its material counterpart.
You're right, Averroes, that the senses are the starting point. But the intellectus abstracts from them. It moves beyond the particulars. It seeks veritates aeternae, eternal truths that aren't bound by time or physical limits. The soul's true potential is in this capacity for abstraction. If the intellectus can understand eternal truths, then it must survive beyond the body. It's not destroyed when the body dies. It continues in some form to engage with those truths.
Thomas, you're trying to make Aristotle say something he doesn't. The ability to grasp universalia doesn't mean the soul escapes the body. The soul is the forma of the body, and when the body dies, its work is done. Aristotle doesn't talk about a soul floating off into eternity. He's concerned with this life, grounded in the body, in the here and now.
Thomas Aquinas flips to the Anima, Book 3, reading aloud.
The soul never thinks without an image. It is not possible to think without a mental picture, and thinking depends on sensory perception. Thought, then, always begins with phantasmata, mental images. But this doesn't mean the intellect is limited to what the senses provide. The intellect uses these sensory images, but it abstracts from them to reach universal truths. This ability to think beyond the particular, to grasp universalia, universals, is what elevates the soul.
Exactly, Thomas. And this is where Aristotle's insight is sharpest. The intellectus cannot operate without the senses to provide it with images, phantasmata. All thought begins with these sensory impressions, these mental pictures. Aristotle makes it clear, without perception, there is no thought. The body's sensory input is the foundation, and the soul builds from that, but it never escapes its reliance on the physical world.
But Averroes, Aristotle's point about mental pictures, doesn't mean the intellect is trapped in the sensory realm. The intellect agens, active intellect, abstracts beyond those images. Yes, thought starts with sensory impressions, but the soul is capable of transforming them into something greater, something universal. When we think about justice or truth, we're not bound by any single image. These are eternal concepts, universalia, and the intellect, even though it uses the senses, can reach them independently.
You're right that the intellect abstracts from mental pictures, but it still depends on them. Without those sensory inputs, there's no thinking at all. Aristotle's intellectus agens isn't some free-floating faculty. It's grounded in the sensory world. Everything the soul does is rooted in the body's interaction with the world around it. There's no detaching the intellect from the senses. They are fundamentally linked.
I agree that the senses play a crucial role, but the intellect doesn't stop there. It takes those impressions and moves into the realm of the eternal. When Aristotle speaks of the intellect grasping universalia, he's talking about something far beyond the particular images we receive from our senses. The rational soul, anima rationalis, isn't tied down by the body. It uses the body, but it also transcends it. That's what allows the intellect to engage with abstract truths.
You keep reaching for transcendence, Thomas, but Aristotle keeps bringing us back to the body. The soul thinks, yes, but it thinks through the body, through sensory images, through the senses. The intellect can reach for universals, but only because it's fed by the sensory world. It doesn't float above it, it's grounded in it. There is no separation between intellect and body.
Thomas Aquinas opens De Anima, Book 3, reading aloud.
Aristotle says, the intellect seems to be a substance, and it alone is capable of being separated from the body as that which is eternal and immortal. This is where Aristotle clearly indicates the soul's potential for immortality. The intellectus, the intellect, is separable and eternal, suggesting that it survives beyond the death of the body.
Thomas, Aristotle does say that the intellect is separable, but you're rushing to conclusions. He doesn't mean that the individual soul, with its personal thoughts and memories, lives on. The active intellect, intellectus agens, is universal, shared by all. When we die, it's the universal intellect that persists, not the personal soul. Our individual experiences and memories tied to the body perish with it. The intellect that survives is not personal. It's a shared eternal force.
Averroes, you're limiting the scope of what Aristotle is suggesting. Yes, the active intellect is universal in a sense, but the fact that it is separable from the body shows that it's not just tied to our physical existence. The rational soul, anima rationalis, engages with eternal truths. things that go beyond the sensory world. Aristotle wouldn't describe the intellect as separable if it didn't have a personal aspect that could exist independently. The soul doesn't die with the body. It continues to understand and know.
You're turning Aristotle into a mystic, Thomas. The intellect may be separable, but Aristotle is talking about a universal intellect. It's not a personal faculty that survives after death. When the body dies, the passive intellect, our personal thoughts and experiences, dies with it. The only thing that continues is the active intellect, and that's not something individual. It's shared by everyone, a universal force of knowledge. There's no personal immortality in this.
But if the intellect can engage with universals, it must have a personal aspect. Each soul, each anima rationalis, grasps these eternal truths in a unique way. It's not just a shared force, it's an individual engagement with the divine. The separability Aristotle speaks of points to the soul's ability to continue its intellectual journey beyond the physical world. The soul, especially the rational soul, can't just disappear with the body. It lives on because it's meant to understand things that are eternal.
You're holding on to personal immortality because of your Christian beliefs, Thomas, not because Aristotle says it. He's talking about the survival of the intellect in a universal sense, not in a personal one. The intellectus survives, yes, but it's not your intellect or mine. It's the collective intellect, the shared knowledge that transcends individual life. When we die, the personal soul, as Aristotle sees it, fades with the body. The active intellect continues, but it's not something we can claim as our own.
Averroes, I'm not denying that my Christian beliefs inform my view, but Aristotle's own words point to something more than just a collective, impersonal intellect. When he speaks of the intellectus as separable and immortal, he isn't merely describing a universal force. If the intellect can grasp universalia, eternal truths, then it must have the capacity for individual understanding. Think about it. If the intellect were just a collective pool of knowledge, then how do we explain the unique ways in which each soul engages with these truths? Each person comes to knowledge through their own journey, their own reasoning. That suggests there's something personal in this process. Aristotle isn't just talking about an abstract shared intellect. He's pointing to the intellect as something capable of existing on its own, tied to the individual soul's unique experience with the eternal. So no, it's not just a Christian interpretation. The rational soul, by its nature, is directed towards something beyond the body, and in that lies its immortality. The intellect doesn't dissolve into some shared entity. It continues its journey because it has always been striving for eternal knowledge. That is personal. Averroes and Aristotle knew it.
As the storm begins to calm outside, the questions raised in this debate linger in the air. The nature of the soul, its connection to the body, and its potential immortality are not easily answered. Yet, through the voices of Averroes and Aquinas, we glimpse the enduring power of Aristotle's De Anima. This text, written centuries ago, still sparks a dialogue that transcends time, faith, and culture, inviting each of us to wrestle with the mysteries of existence. The debate may not settle today, but the search for truth continues, in every corner of thought, as it has through the ages. If you're interested in purchasing these books for deeper study, we've included links in the description below. Don't forget to explore, read, and challenge your own thoughts. And if you enjoyed this discussion, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more philosophical debates and explorations.